Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Medical Board of California Interested Parties Complaint Tracking System meeting. Pursuant to SB 189, this meeting is being conducted via WebEx. Public comments will be heard for individuals wishing to do so. In order to be ready for public comment, we ask to please ensure that your comments can be heard clearly by being connected to the audio of this meeting through the proper method. If you're having difficulty hearing the audio of this meeting, it could be because the device you're connecting with has bandwidth limitations. If you do have difficulty hearing the audio of this meeting using your device, please click the ellipsis button at the bottom of the WebEx application or the audio and video menu item at the top of the WebEx application, and then select Switch Audio. You'll see an option to call in and will be provided with a telephone number, access code, and attendee ID that can be used to connect to the meeting audio via phone. Using the information provided, it will automatically disconnect your device's audio and connect your phone to the name you joined the meeting with. By using this method, if you're having audio problems with your device, this will still allow you to participate and hear the audio of the board meeting. Please see the instructions on how to connect link on the last page of the meeting agenda for step-by-step WebEx instructions, including screenshots. Thank you, Dr. Bholat and Ms. Lubiano. You can now start the meeting. Dr. Bholat, Ms. Lubiano?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yes.
On the agenda, we had a place here for you guys to have any introductory comments you may like to give. Otherwise, we can go ahead and get started with agenda item 2.
Sir, I don't mind. I apologize. I thought Ms. Lubiano was chairing, but we're all here to listen to one another and gain insight. And so I'm really pleased to be part of this very important work. So thank you for all of the participants from the public and interested parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bholat. And I didn't really have much to say besides that this is a long time coming. I think everyone here, as well as in the public, is looking for something like this, and we're needing something like this to keep everyone aware of where their complaint is in the system, and getting all the different notifications and so forth. And what I wanted to address was that this is a big undertaking, and by having this meeting, and we are pressing forward. So I wanted to acknowledge that this is progress. And although we may want something perfect out the gate with all the bells and whistles, I think the practicality is that it is a big effort. It'll take time, and it won't be perfect. So I know we have a good team that's building it internally, with Sean at the helm and our various team members. So, like they say, progress, not perfection. And I'll be so pleased that we have something that's working, that's informing everyone along the way. And in time, as we put in all the different features, it will get there. So I'm looking forward to getting this started. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lubiano. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing here now the presentation that we gave back in May of last year. The agenda calls for us starting off with giving this presentation. Sorry, I'm going to clear a few of these things out of the way. Giving this presentation just to go over the features presented originally to the board. I hope this screen isn't in the way. I'm trying to find a way to move all this stuff. Giving the same presentation we gave to the board back in May. It was linked in the agenda. So some of the dates and things, I'll try to update things as we go here, but some of the stuff may be a little outdated since it was previously given at that meeting. Just to give everyone kind of the run through of what was planned back then. We did ask for public comments last week, written public comments, and we did receive one public comment. We will go over kind of the tracking format that we're going to use to track the suggestions made during today's meeting, because the third part, agenda item 2C, will be calling for public comment for individuals wishing to make a public comment, and we'll be logging those public comments. There's going to be today's meeting, and then there'll be another meeting in May, and we'll go over the details and the date of that. And in between then, we're also taking written public comments as well. And all of those suggestions will be compiled into this tracking document that, again, we'll take a look at here in a few minutes. And we will be reviewing all of those suggestions for feasibility, both technically and legally, and responding to all of those suggestions. Those suggestions, along with the original features, will go to the board with kind of a loose project plan of what could be incorporated into a first release, and then what could be, incorporated down the line, as well as updates on any features or suggestions that can't be accommodated for either technical or legal reasons, and exactly why. With the board's permission, then at a later board meeting on those final sets of features and suggestions, then we can actually start an official project plan and move forward from there on. So again, this is for those of you that looked at the agenda early and rewatched the May board meeting, this update will be basically the same thing as that, but we wanted to go ahead and make sure everybody was aware of those things, so we didn't have to, worry about anyone suggesting something that maybe was already included. So, so again, this is the same presentation from the May board meeting. These go over the requirements and the features that we had suggested for the minimum viable project that we would like to start. According to the California Department of Technology Stage 1 Business Analysis Plan that is required by the California Information Technology Project Approval Lifecycle per Statewide Information Management Manual Section 19A. We have to define all of these requirements in that so we can see what kind of oversight is required later on for the system to be implemented. So, sorry, last time I wasn't presenting either. So, the primary goal of the system will be to allow complainants to easily keep up with the progress of submitted complaints through the complaint review process. The complaint review process is described on the board's website. You can search for the complaint review process or find it from the Consumers tab titled Complaint Review Process. And it can be a complicated process with sometimes long periods of time between traditional paper layer updates being sent to the complainant to notify them of changes in the status of their complaint. During this process, complainants have to reach out to board staff via phone or email for status checks, which are time-consuming for complainants and board staff, and are only available during regular business hours. Paper letters take time to be delivered via postal mail and come with the inherent risks of being misdelivered or getting lost in the mail. Additionally, because of resource limitations, paper letters cannot be generated for every update made on a complaint. It just wouldn't be feasible. Online portal solves many of these limitations by being available to complainants with near 24/7 uptime. It can provide all relevant and accessible information in a single interface for the lifecycle of the complaint, and it doesn't rely on external delivery services such as postal mail or any other delivery service. Privacy and security is of the utmost importance in the system, and to protect the information for each complaint, the system will only be accessible to the original complainant who submitted the complaint. Name and email address information will be required to be submitted with the complaints in order to be accessible through the system. First, the complainant will need to enter the complaint number that they are interested in checking the status of, and next, the complainant will be required to confirm the email address associated with the complaint. After solving a CAPTCHA challenge that ensure no one's able to try to brute force access the system, the user will attest that they are the complainant associated with the complaint, and an individual access code and link will be sent to the email address associated with the complaint. The individual use access code will be valid for a single use and will expire after 2 minutes. So much like accessing your banks or anything you might have a multi-factor sort of authentication on currently, you'll receive a link with a code, and that code will be usable for one time to access the system. If you want to, once you've logged out of the system and you want to come back an hour later, you have to go through that login process again. But that's, again, all in the name of security. So to go over the general information available, the main screen, you picture it like a big laundry list of items. The general complaint information displayed will include the date the complaint was received, along with an open or closed status indicator. It'll have the respondent's name and address information with a link to their DCA search profile, so you can go and check it, any updates on that respondent's license profile. Have the complainant's name, mailing address, email address, and phone number, so the complainant themselves can make sure that their contact information is correct, and that way if analyst or investigator is trying to reach out to them, they can make sure they have the correct information there. There will be summary information about the complaint submitted online. So basically whatever description of the complaint that was typed in by the complainant in the Breeze online system, that same information will be shown there. So in the case of having multiple complaints open, they'll know specifically which complaint that they're viewing. And then we'll have information about complaint activity details. And there's multiple sections here of complaint activity details we'll go over. Kind of the first part of the complaint review process, the complaints are moving through various sections of the Medical Board of California enforcement units, and then under the Division of Investigation Health Quality Investigative Unit. These activities will help to identify the stage of the complaint review process that the complaint is currently in, and will show the prior stages that have occurred in the process. Some of these activities can occur multiple times as the complaint is being reassigned between analysts and investigators in the same unit. So you can see all the different ones there, and those will correspond to that complaint review process document that we have on our website. So there'll be some contact information listed when it is currently assigned to a specific analyst or specific investigator. The contact information for that individual will be viewable, so they can reach out directly to that person. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold too, so I apologize. I have to cough or mute you here from time to time. In terms of complaint activity for different requests, at any stage of the complaint review process, requests for information, including but not limited to medical releases, interviews, death certificates, can be requested from the complainant, the respondent, prior or subsequent provider, or a coroner. These activities will indicate when the requests were made and when responses were received. Depending on the number of involved parties, there can be multiples of each type of these requests listed on the complaint. If multiple requests are made to a particular involved party, one request may indicate the response was received, while the other request may remain open until all responses are received. So, you could see especially early on in the complaint process, a flood of requests for different records go out, and then they'll slowly get checked off as things are being responded to. And we can see which ones are fulfilled and which ones are still pending. And then what we hope to have is when we're asking for releases from the complainant, easy way for the complainant to be able to just print that release out directly from there, so they don't have to wait on the paper mail version, and then they can email it back into the board and eventually hopefully upload it online through the system. So, the next section will be the disposition section of the activity codes. These activities relate to the final stages of the complaint review process when analysts review and investigation steps have all been completed and decisions are made about whether or not to move forward with an accusation, refer the complaint to the citation and fine unit, or close the complaint without further action. If the decision to move forward with an accusation is made, information about when the matter is referred to the Office of the Attorney General, and if the complainant is accepted or declined, and subsequently if the board files an accusation or petition to revoke probation. So if the complaint does move forward to this part of the process, you'll see those stages and when they took place, and kind of know that, okay, now the complaint has kind of left the board's action, other things are taking place outside of the board, but you'll have an indication of that happening here in the system. Excuse me. The last section of the complaint activity that we'll be showing is the closure section. Again, this list is not all encompassing. It is just some of the different types of closure, the more common types of closure, and various outcomes associated with the complaint. It'll show the date, if it was closed for one of these reasons, and if this code gets posted onto it, it's just basically mean the complaint is closed. You would also receive a follow-up paper letter indicating this stuff, but it will also be reflected on the system, including the date that it did occur. There's also a code for reopening of a complaint in the case that additional information is received, something triggered the complaint to be reopened. It can go from closed back to reopen, and additional steps can take place in there. So just picture this as a big long list of all of these requests and the different units assigned to, and then the disposition and the closure. So you can see these things all happening in a big chronological order throughout the system. So back in May when we originally had presented this, what we had completed up to that point was the initial requirements gathering, making sure that the data would be available from the BRIE system and near real-time access without having to bring a consultant in to generate those services and help set the things up. We did a proof of concept to make sure that that would be available so that it's a much larger scope of a project. Basically, if we have to consultant in to do that, to onboard them with the whole BRIE system and how everything works. So we were happy to report at the time that we would be able to do that without consulting services. So technically that hurdle was cleared, and now it's just putting all the pieces together. At the time, we were in the process of legal review of tracking all of the complaint data in BRIEs and deciding what could or could not be available. Basically, there are hundreds of codes with multiple different outcomes and dispositions in the BRIE system that adds up to thousands and thousands of different combinations that had to be reviewed as to whether or not those were okay to provide through the system or not. So some of the bullets that we went through previously are some of the bigger items there that we think people were more interested in seeing and hearing about. But there are other activities that may be made available. We went through that entire list with legal. We had a pretty comfortable understanding of which ones that would and would not be able to be shared. As part of these suggestions, we may find that there are things that we're not tracking that need to be tracked and that we could add tracking to eventually make those available. But other things that maybe asked for either aren't being tracked, can't be tracked, or are being tracked and can't be shared publicly, even with the complainant. So depending on the outcome of some of these requests, we'll be responding to those individually. But the last several screens listed the main points that we were looking at sharing. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the next steps would be after gathering these feature suggestions in this meeting, and then again in the May 12th, May 12th second interested parties meeting. We will be gathering all those feature suggestions, responding to each of them, what can be included, what can't be included, and which release we think they can be included in, and then providing the board with an updated presentation much like this one, but incorporating all of those suggestions that we feel that we can take on in a first release and then subsequent releases, and then giving kind of a loose project plan timeframe. The reason it has to be a loose project plan timeframe is because once we get the board's acceptance and their approval to move forward with it, we'll have to generate a bunch of required project management artifacts that are required by the California Department of Technology. We submit those to the California Department of Technology after DCA, gives their overview and approval on them as well. And then we have to wait and see exactly what level of oversight the California Department of Technology wants on this project. Sometimes they can tell you, go ahead and do it and you're fine, you're clear. Other times they will call for their own project management depending on just how large and how visible the system is and things like that. So we're expecting a few months turnaround time it would take just to get their approval and their oversight recommendations before we can actually start, developing the system, testing it, and then releasing it. So the timeframes you see here were on the timeline of if we had gotten the approval back in May of 2022. So, we were shooting for about a year timeframe from then. Hopefully it'll be around July or August that we'll be bringing this updated presentation and updated suggestions and requirements to the board for approval. So we're looking at, sometime still around probably mid 2024 before we would, if everything goes right and we can get all the approvals that we need to get started working on this system. So the future enhancement plans, excuse me. The automatic email notification when a complaint is initiated, we're actually working on that process right now since the planning stages got held up here on the project a little bit. We've been working with the Breeze team at DCA and the Breeze vendor on getting the automatic email notification when a complaint is completed. So we're hoping in the next coming months, hopefully by Q3 of this year at least, that an email notification will go out anytime a complaint is submitted online, or when a complaint is submitted by paper and is entered in the system by staff here at the Medical Board of California. We call that the complaint intake process. But so once the data gets inputted about the complaint into the system, as long as the complainant provides an email address, and that email address is legible in the case of a paper complaint, but when submitted online, it should certainly be accurate since it's provided by the complainant. Basically, that individual will receive an email letting them know that their complaint was received, along with the complaint number that will be needed. It's commonly referred to as a control number in the paper letters that we send out. But that complaint control number can then be used to access this system. So the original timeline called for that to be available after the system was completed. Now we hope to have this done so that before the system is completed, that's up and ready to go, so people will have their complaint numbers to log in with on day one. We hope in the future to add viewable electronic copies of the complaint form itself. So when it comes in via a paper form, those get scanned and attached to the actual complaint in our back office system called Breeze, and we hope to make that viewable for the complainant so that they can make sure that they, again, are just kind of referencing the complaint in the case of if they have multiple complaints going at the same time, they know exactly which complaint form this complaint corresponds to. Any letters that are generated and sent out to the complainants, we hope to make those available through the system so that they can, maybe beat the paper mail to them. If they get, if they log into the system and see a new letter was generated and attached for them there, and the multiple days that it takes for that to leave our office, get put into an envelope, sent through the postal mail, and received by the complainant, and they might be able to review it online and even respond before that paper letter even gets there. And we're still required by law to send these paper letters, but again, it can just help speed up the process in some cases. We'd like a messaging capability between the complainant and the currently assigned analyst and investigator. This wouldn't be like a chat. I had someone ask if this was going to be like a chat feature. It won't be a real-time back and forth. Just think of it as an email without the cumbersome need to find the particular analyst that you're dealing with, or for the analyst to go back and attach the information back into the system. It'll all be through the system, so it can automatically be logged in there, and then we have a good digital trail of the messages that go back and forth. So all the information is automatically attached to the complaint. Additional manual steps aren't needed by the complainant or the analyst or investigator to make sure that that information all stays contained in one place. And then finally, we'd like the ability to upload files by the complainant. Generally, this would be used for a medical release of some type, smaller PDFs. These aren't going to be uploading of medical records or anything large, just because honestly the upload limit will be fairly low. It'll be perfect for few pages here and there, PDF forms, releases, things like that. If hundreds and hundreds of pages need to be transferred of medical records, things like that, there's other mechanisms to do that that are more efficient than using this plan system. So that's just a few of those plans that we had in mind. We hadn't really associated those with the release. We just wanted to let people know that those were in the plans, in the works. We were going to add some of the abilities in the first release so that we didn't have to go back and make major changes in subsequent releases, so kind of making plans for these things without the actual implementation of them, because we were again trying to get that first release out as soon as possible. So I believe that's the end of it there. So let me go ahead and stop this presentation here. So that's the general presentation that was given back in the May 2021 board meeting. Ms. Lubiano and Dr. Bholat, if you don't have any questions, what we proposed doing next was I was going to have a coworker here, Nicole Kramer, displaying our tracking that we were going to use for this, and I was going to go over the written comments received last week and kind of the format that we were going to track these things in before we started taking public comments.
I had a few questions, Sean.
Sure, absolutely.
So I understand, when this is up and running and someone has a new complaint, I think that's straightforward, right? They go in, they submit it. So how do we think about all the ones submitted in the past and how those all get in? How far back do we go, et cetera?
How far back we go had not been decided. It had basically the decision was made that the existing complaints would work the same way. So there could be a complaint, point forward, new codes as they become available in the system, they start tracking them that way in Breeze. But there could be complaints that were opened so long ago that their original activities from, say, multiple years ago wouldn't correspond to the same codes that we're using currently. They were not available at that time, and they don't typically go back unless it's for reporting purposes. They don't typically go back and add historical information via newly created codes. So while you might be able to pull up a complaint from 3 years ago, let's say received 3 years ago, and see when it was received and some of the basic information I listed there, some of the activity codes that maybe have become only available in the last year might not have been entered into that old complaint 3 years ago. So while every complaint that's open, we do have the plan of showing it here in the system. Again, there could be some historical information left off. I would say complaints in the last year would have the activity codes that we're planning on displaying already there and present, because those are the codes that we've been reviewing. And I would guess, a high percentage of them would even be on those 3-year-old complaints and things like that. But there is, the possibility, I want to just point out, of maybe a particular activity that only became available a year ago that was logged on a recent complaint, wasn't logged on a really old complaint, and therefore would be missing on the old complaint. It's not that that activity didn't happen. It's just that they didn't have a code to track it at the time, if that makes sense. And then the general idea with closed complaints was that after a complaint was closed, it would be available for so long. I think we were talking about a 90-day kind of a expiration for the complaints, because it's kind of a security gap to leave them open for too long. If we don't want people, again, having too big of a attack vector to be able to try to brute force their way into any complaints or anything like that. So we assumed after about 90 days the complaint was, after closure, that complaint would be no longer need to be accessed through the system. They'd have gotten the paper letter and everything they needed at that point for their own documentation.
Got it. No, thank you for that. That makes sense. It sounds like we have technological and kind of historical challenges with some of the past cases. So I think going forward, or once it's ready, it might be helpful to think about kind of an FAQ page or somewhere so that it's transparent to everyone.
Absolutely.
What
yeah,
happened.
and this has been being discussed now for so long. A lot of these activities, even though they evolve, they're ever evolving, some of these activity codes, but a lot of them now, that since we've talked about them originally over a year ago, a lot of these codes will be on the majority of complaints open, currently and stuff like that. So I think the information that is to be shared will be shared for, high 90% of the complaints being viewed through there. Sorry, Dr. Bholat, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. So I just want to take a step back so that as we're talking about all of the evolution of the progress that's been made, just thinking about our 10,000 complaints per year at the beginning, that as a consumer, the way in which these are going to be triaged, I didn't hear any type of turnstile in the system. I suspect that goes based upon what gets coded. And subsequent, I think an important what Ms. Lubiano mentioned is, I think that's going to be a really important to hear from individuals is how far back we go. We can, you know, if you've got, and I think that's my question is how far back do we have non-responses? And we say, okay, out of however many we have in the pipeline, how many are sitting there? Just so that's the transparency piece. And then as a board and with direction from the executives, you know, and from input with the public, you know, we can go backwards or we can move forward. And I think that how we identify what's sitting in the queue becomes important based upon the triage or whatever number or coding. So if later on we can hear a little bit more what's sitting in the queue, I think that's important because that level sets where we need to go, not just go forward, but also what's sitting there and what response those that have submitted their complaints, how we can close those out efficiently.
So by sitting there, you mean the complaints that are open and being investigated
Open
by
complaints,
analysts
I
and
should say that.
investigators?
Yeah, I should say that
Okay.
more succinctly. Open complaints.
Okay, yeah. So certainly every open complaint on day one when release one goes live, every open complaint will be viewable through the system. The only plan we have for complaints not being viewable by the system are those complaints, again, that are more than 90 days closed. So what I was referring to with Ms. Lubiano was, say there's an open complaint today that's 3 years old. There
Correct.
could be some of the activity tracking codes that we created, let's say in the last year, that weren't available 3 years ago when that complaint was originally opened.
Right.
So most of the bullets that I talked about in the previous slide, those activities would be available. But let's say one of those activity codes was created just within the last year, and that activity for that 3-year-old complaint happened 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And the analyst, even though they recorded that event taking place in their notes, they didn't have the activity code at the time to track it in the system. Because we can only pull out the activity codes, we can't share general notes saved by the analyst because there's confidential information there that can't go out everywhere. That activity wasn't available, and therefore we can't extract it because it wasn't entered into the complaint at the time in order to show it to the complainant. Whereas a more recent complaint, one created in the last year, that activity code was available and it would show on that complaint. So, and in general, the complaints that we have that are 3+ years old, it's a far smaller number than the complaints we receive year to year and stuff. But we certainly could give you an updated number count of how many open complaints there are at the May board meeting, or I'm sorry, at the May interested parties meeting, to give you a general idea of that.
And that would be great. And I think that, and maybe it was explained, and my apologies if I didn't make the crosswalk from the old complaint, not numbers, but the code to the new crosswalk to the new codes. I think what's important, at least I think we'd all probably agree on that, is of those codes, there's going to be a subset of codes that are going to be much more concerning than others. And that is, I think, a topic of discussion of those codes at some point. Okay. So those are my comments, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Yeah. So the bullets in that last presentation correspond to codes that we currently have existing. So some of these suggestions may bring to light codes that we may have that were deemed already for some reason that we couldn't share that information even with the complainant, or codes that we're not currently tracking that maybe we need to add a code for, and then we can track that stuff, and that can become available as well too. So whole point of this meeting here is to gather those kinds of requests here. And so if you and Ms. Lubiano have suggestions about that too, we're happy to write down your guys' comments here in this tracker. Nicole, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and display in that tracker.
I had one more question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Lubiano.
I don't know if I missed this earlier, but do we give any kind, so when a complaint moves to the next stage, do we give an email notification, or have we thought about text messaging as well?
Text messaging has a high overhead cost with it, but certainly an email would be feasible. The first step would be to get that initial complaint receive notification email to go out. So that's one that we're focusing on right now. But yeah, it would be feasible. That's kind of our proof of concept on that is, hey, we've received your complaint. Here's your complaint number. Then after that, once we have kind of that stood up, then the idea of, okay, your complaint has progressed from here to there, or this particular event has happened. Those are definitely things that we can add in there too. And it can be just as much as a trigger to say, hey, log into the complaint tracking system to see the updates, or we can, provide specific information like, your release of information, your medical records request form was received. Thank you. I mean, we can tailor it as much as we want, trying to give, meaningful updates, not, overloading someone with updates, having to check in the system and stuff like that too. So, but definitely, it can be done that way too. We try to steer away from text messaging just because there's a cost associated with that, where emails are much freer, cheaper. So.
No, that's good to know. And another thing I was thinking about is, just in general about how people tend to learn differently, take in information differently. And so I was thinking about the different ways, visual ways we can present that on the interface. So, I mean, this is not rocket science, right? We've seen this in other kinds of systems where there's an actual visual timeline, on the site with a dot that shows, your complaints in this phase right now, and, the use of colors to show what's green, what's red, where is it stopped. So I think something like, thinking about those kinds of visuals and enhancements, I think help different kinds of people. And then also when a complaint is in a certain stage, and if, for example, it may be stuck there because a document is missing, maybe we can have icons that are red, that whatever document's missing, and it shows that. Or if it's green and done, there's a check mark and it's green. So I think those kinds of things are helpful for people. Just something really easy, in a simple interface.
Absolutely. We have two kinds of major activities in the Breeze system. What we call, a start to end, which is basically, there's a starting point and then a finite end to that activity, and then what we call point in times. And the point in times are, this thing happened on this day at this time, and that's it. That's all you really know about it. So those ones that have the start and the end, we can definitely have, some sort of a look and feel component to it to shows this thing hasn't ended yet, or it ended with a, not the optimal outcome kind of a thing, green, yellow, red, those kinds of categories. What I want to be careful, though, not to set expectations of is that it's not like a package being delivered where you have, a date it left a facility and the date it was delivered, that we can show it's 67, this complaint is 67% of the way complete, because sometimes that 67 can bounce back, and, there's no definitive end to a complaint. Not every complaint follows the same process and stuff like that. So if we try to give a kind of a start and an end, and here's where you are, that's so different from complaint to complaint. I don't want to make it only going to be using those, like you said, the icons and colors and things like that to show that. And really what we hope to do is in subsequent board meetings, we can do a proof of concept mock-up of what it looks like, a wireframe, if you will, of, how the system will work without any of the, or how the system will look without any of the functionality in the background, just to kind of get some of that kind of feedback on what you think, stuff there. But
No,
yeah,
that's great points. I think what you said about it not being like tracking a package, I think that's a really good point, that people, and even myself, understands that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, but really clear than saying like, especially the things the complainant can do something about. You know, if we have a request for medical records that's pending, and we need that, you know, request that form to be filled out by the complainant and sent back to us, we can have that stand out in red, you know, in the system, along with a link to the form and then the email address they should send it to when they're done completing it, and eventually, hopefully, just an upload button right there and there that they can provide it to. So things like that definitely just streamline it out.
Exactly.
But yeah, I see Nicole's already added your point in there, so we'll definitely keep track of that one. So I see, before I go back to you, Dr. Bholat, Ms. Lubiano, did you have any other questions?
Yes, I was thinking about what about when it's an anonymous complaint? Because if they're anonymous, then they're not going to give their information, their name, their email address. How does that work?
Absolutely. In that situation, we would not be able to make that complaint viewable online. Now, someone could submit an anonymous complaint and create a anonymous, you know, trash email account just for use to checking that complaint if they wanted to. You know, they can provide false information, but we find a lot of times without a complainant being there to answer questions that the analysts and the investigators have and fill out those medical releases and stuff like that, the complaints don't really go anywhere. And so we're asking people to provide that information just in general because it helps the quality of a complaint as it's progressing through the complaint review process. But definitely in terms of just the scope of this system, if an email address is not provided that we can do that multi-factor authentication through, that complaint would not be viewable through the system.
Miss Lubiano, Nicole Kramer, I work with Sean, but I do know that we do sometimes get anonymous complaints where at the beginning, maybe somebody would like to remain anonymous. And so they submit the complaint online, but over time they may contact the complaint unit. And if they can prove that they're the complainant in one way or another, we can actually tie them to that complaint. And then they could later, if they determine they would like to cooperate, then they can continue to get those updates later at that time. Just wanted to provide that information.
Got it. No, that's helpful. And the other question I had was about testing. I know that's a few months that's part of the process, but can you talk a little bit about how we will do kind of alpha beta testing and who we would use and so forth?
Yeah. You know, so initially it'll be very, you know, basic unit testing. Is this code that we were planning on showing that kind of stuff, all with test data in a generic test environment, to the point that we felt that the you know, end-to-end testing part was ready. At that point, you know, we could start reaching out even to individual complainants on a small scale and making the production environment available before a full rollout, you know, to get some feedback from certain users. But in general, we would use that test environment till we thought it was pretty much 100% ready to go, setting up certain scenarios and mimicking production data, but you know, all the data would be obfuscated to the point you couldn't tell which real complainant was or tie it back to any certain respondent or complainant. But just looking at those individual data markers of those activities and seeing what's available, you know, and is it showing the way we expect it to be shown.
Thank you. And I like the idea of having the users who are actually using it, getting some feedback from them, because, you know, I think us here, you know, most of us have not been in that kind of driver's seat, and I value their, you know, their input, you know, having used the system before or are using it now.
Our hope is to gather as much as that, you know, kind of feedback at this point, because, you know, generally by the time the requirements are defined and set and the system's development, yeah, we can, you know, make a font size bigger here, change this color there or something, but going back and adding a particular feature that wasn't planned on at that point can be really complex, you know. So while we can keep that enhancement list open, you know, and keep adding requests to things, really hoping to get the final requirements for the first release done, documented again, so we can get that oversight handled by the California Department of Technology. Because once those requirements are set, that will be what the first release is, at least. We wouldn't be able to change the requirements at that point again, because there's a project management oversight component that we'd have to go through a lengthy process to change, and that would again just delay that first release even more. So yeah, we're really hoping people that, that's why we set up this interested parties, that people that have been through the complaint process now, they can let us know, if there are things that we overlooked initially, what would be really helpful in their minds, and then we can, hopefully accommodate as many of those requests as possible.
Understood. No, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Bholat? Yeah, go ahead. Dr. Bholat, I think you're on mute.
On our 7th bullet, on our complaint, file a complaint page, we talk about the nature of the complaint. In this new system, are there going to be drop downs? Is it going to be something that people can generally help by sorting it out as to what it is? It's a complaint because of a delay in service, it's a delay in treatment, it's because of this, and utilizing what already exists in the area of most insurance companies and managed care plans, what becomes a problem that becomes actionable. I bring that up because, as I mentioned at the beginning, which I don't see on this list here, is that if we're going to take each piece of paper and each email one by one, I'm wondering if there is going to be any consideration for the use of pre-data sorting and then utilizing some type of technology overlaid to be able to sort these things out. We talked about, I heard consumers loud and clear, death, that was something that was very important. Other things that became important, how do they get to the top? So I'm going to leave that for to hear from our public, and I thank you for listening again. And this is going to be an exciting process for sure.
Yeah, and then just to clarify that point a little bit, that the main step you talk about there, the narrative coming in from the complainant and that getting coded into our system, is the one of the biggest steps of the complaint intake process. Our buckets, we commonly refer them to as our buckets, the different classifications and complexity codes in the system that are kind of predefined by a lot of those different priorities and things in law. Nicole is our enforcement business analyst, so she knows the codes and things a lot better than I do. But a lot of those codes are complicated even for our staff to determine which bucket certain things go into, and there's a process where it goes through manager review to make sure that it ends up in the right bucket, and everything else in addition to just the initial analysts reviewing things. That wouldn't be something that we would expect a complainant themselves to be able to categorize. They can provide, I believe it's up to 4,000 characters in the Breeze complaint submission screens to help provide what they think it should be, but then it does come down to once it's been reviewed, it being put into the same bucket, and then those buckets are what we use to show different statistics in the annual reports and things like that. So it's very important that those codes are used consistently across all the complaints that come in. So that's why we have kind of a review process from the intake analysts through the CCU managers to make sure those codes get set right. But wherever possible, yeah, we like to use drop downs and things to help categorize the information, but the complaint narratives where we just kind of give them their room to tell their story, if you will.
Sean, I had another question.
Sure.
I was wondering, what other tracking systems are we kind of comparing against and or using as an example as we're building ours?
I can't say there's another tracking system that's directly comparable. I'd like to try every system that we design when we came up with the last physician survey, you know, I said, let's make something like TurboTax simple, where there's, you know, one question per page, and simple design ideas and stuff like that. We try to steal from things that we come across in commonplace, but I can't think of you know, any system that, or any other state board that has a you know, complaint process as involved as ours does, and that I've had any experience, at least with their tracking system. So I think we're just trying to take feedback from the public and make the, you know, the features that we're hearing being asked for the most, make those available first, and then we can continue to evolve it from there.
Got it. Thank you.
Can I just, Dr. Bholat, may I ask you a question? You mentioned the data and being able to provide it in aggregate is kind of, I think, I caught your ask there. What do you think? Could you kind of give me a few ideas of the things that would be most important to you? Because we may have the ability to currently do things like that, but I want to make sure that I'm fully understanding like what would be important to you or to the public, and maybe that's additional questions that or answers we'll get today. But it sounds like you kind of have a road you're going down, so I want to make sure I'm following it.
Yeah, I was thinking of the, you know, the Office of the Patient Advocate at the state. There's a whole, you can select whether you're Medicare, Medi-Cal, and then you can file a complaint. And so I think that there may be, and obviously
Uh-oh, I lost.
Sorry, Dr. Bholat, it looks like you got put on mute somehow.
I think I lost you. Yeah,
there we
sorry.
go. So the different boards may have their own codes and different buckets. My point is because we are about healthcare teams, doctors, all of this in my mind, from the Office of the Patient Advocate, from the Medi-Cal to Medicare and so on, there are different ways in which patients can express themselves, not just by free text, but to maybe think about how other systems are collecting, because then we can start to compare apples to apples in the future. That was my point.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the main thing we're basing a lot of these questions that we're gathering off of is our complaint forms, you know, and then what information can we share back to them? You know, the complainant knows a lot of information right on the complaint form because they're the one who submitted it. But in terms of the information that's gathered after that complaint is received and initiated by us here, then what of that information can we share back? That's, you know, what's probably of most value to them. So.
Thank you.
So as we go through here, Nicole's going to be, she's showing number 1 there was the item that we did receive in written comment from an individual that I believe has joined the meeting here already too. So if you would like to restate your comment or, you know, elaborate on it further, please feel free, you know, to raise your hand when the time comes. But we're just trying to track basically what's your suggestion, a summary of your suggestion in the B column there, and then you know, who requested it and the organization that they're representing. You're welcome to present a suggestion without any association to any organization. That's fine. Obviously, again, we're just trying to, if provided, we're going to collect that information there so that when we do publish a response of these items, and you know, when they can, when and if they can be incorporated into the system, we're being responsive to everyone's individual comments there. If someone made a comment that you agree with, or even if you disagree with, we're going to log that as a separate item. You know, if someone made a comment and you agree with it, there's no need to second it, you know, or anything in this situation. Where every comment will be addressed. So as long as it makes it onto this tracker, you know, a response will be provided in the, you know, final presentation to the board. But again, we're looking to just get everyone's individual comments down here so that we can take them, analyze them. We hope to get some of it done before the May board meet or the May involved parties meeting. We probably won't have a full response out by then, so we'll be compiling all the suggestions from both of these meetings and then getting those updates out on everything collectively as soon as we can, and then hopefully presenting to the board and moving forward as soon as we can. So Nicole will be helping me scribe as we are listening to individuals' comments. We'll ask any follow-up questions that we need to. We are going to try to have a 5-minute time limit so we can get everybody through. We had a meeting at noon here. I'm not sure of Ms. Lubiano and Dr. Bholat's time commitments, but since it's about 11 o'clock here and we're just getting started on the public comments, I have no problem running late. I don't know if they have any conflicts or anything like that, but we can stay here to get as many comments as we can. Again, we'll that second meeting will be posted after this meeting, and then we'll be taking written comments between now and then. So anyone who has any thoughts after today, they can submit those in writing, and then there's be a second opportunity again there in May. So Dr. Bholat and Ms. Lubiano, if you don't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and we'll open it up to the public. And what I'm hoping to do is have everybody use the Q&A box, the raising hand feature today. If you have to type something in the Q&A box, please don't type your comment. Again, we would appreciate the dialogue of the back and forth so that we can make sure that we're accurately getting your suggestion clearly in our summary box here. And that's why we're displaying it so you can see exactly what we're typing. And that way, if we have it accurately captured there, we can accurately respond to it later on. So if you can't find your hand raising button, you just want to type, I'd like to make a public comment in the Q&A box, we'll go ahead and get you called upon that way. I'm not going to run a hard timer, but again, we're just going to try to keep everyone to about the 5 minutes here so that we can hopefully get through a bunch of people. But if we have to ask clarifying questions, we won't count that time against you or anything like that. So I was going to go ahead and talk about item number 1, but I actually see the requester here, Bennett Feinberg. Bennett, I'm go ahead and send you that request. You should be unmuted now.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is all very interesting. I think it's great. I don't want to waste your time. I think my statement says it there, but I just want to clarify. I work in the prison system in our legal office, and I assist a number of physicians when they call terrified about getting these complaints, because, and my point here is they're terrified and they're full of questions, and I walk them through it as much as possible. If there can be a system that can provide greater transparency for them, when they want to know, have they received my response? Is the reviewer looking at it? Is it closed? Is it off to an investigator? They're absolutely terrified. This is their livelihood. They've spent their life work, and they literally think they're going to lose their license, which can theoretically happen. So whatever can provide more information for all parties involved, I think would be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for your written comment. I was reviewing that over the weekend. Honestly, that we're focused here on the complainant on this particular endeavor, and so the idea of a respondent portal, much the same way, is a very interesting idea. I'd have to say that the focus here is for the complainant, but this is certainly an enhancement, type of request that I could see us, looking into. Everything in that presentation that I gave previously was, complainant focused, and everything we reviewed with the legal teams and everything up to this point is complainant focused. Now, there is obviously the respondent information in the system, and so the potential for a respondents type portal, of the similar kind of features, but to try to tackle complainants and respondents right now would be, double the scope and complicate things quite a bit. So we're definitely going to track your suggestion here, and in the future, after we can get this system stood up, I think it's an interesting idea that we can definitely talk to legal about.
Yeah, I gather all that, but I would say that the respondents have just as much concern and interest in where the status of a complaint is, as does the complainant. At least as much interest in getting that information. And you know, the physicians already have Breeze access. So in many ways, it seems like it would be even easier. You don't have to create a whole new portal for them. You just need to create a link from a portal where they're already identified as the proper individual. So in this way, this seems like it'd be a lot easier than creating some whole new thing. And there's just a lot less information that they need to get. You know, has it been closed? Oh, it's awaiting investigation. You know, there's much fewer things that would need to be done to make this happen, and it would provide a lot of, you know, it would be good customer service. I mean, your customers are not just the public. You know, your customers are your licensees. And so, you know, to be customer focused, as you're clearly trying to do, I think you really need to think about who are all of your stakeholders and customers involved here.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for your public comment. Again, I'm coming from the technical side of things. There's a whole lot of legal review that would have to be done from the respondent end of things. But yeah, technically, Breeze doesn't provide either of these. We can get the data out of Breeze, so we're building portals to show the complainant the information. We'd have to build, it's, you know, not just as simple as making a link available through Breeze, but you know, definitely the, you know, room to have the discussion out there outside of the complainant scope. So we would definitely keep your item here on the tracking, and we'll talk with legal and see what we can do, you know, about this in the future. Appreciate you submitting it. Okay, so if anyone else, check the Q&A box and the hand raising here. Excuse me. Okay, next up here we have Eric Andrews. Eric, you should be receiving that prompt on your end. Sorry, Eric, I think I hit it, but I started coughing right there. There you go. Looks like your line's open.
Can you hear me?
We can. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of points to Bennett Feinberg real quick. Most doctors that we hear from aren't worried about having their licenses revoked. We've had doctors tell us that they know that the medical board rarely revokes a license, and the numbers prove that only about 4% of complaints even make it through the system. While the medical board licenses doctors, it's only to the end that they protect patients. Doctors aren't their customers. So this new system still doesn't show the public all the doctors that have complaints filed against them like the Contractor State License Board does. Doctors are still being protected over consumers. Do you all not see how important it is that when choosing a doctor to be able to see how many complaints have been filed against a doctor historically and presently? Sure, most will have been dismissed by this board because that's what the board does. But I want to know if a doctor has had, say, 15 complaints against them in the last 10 years. Restaurants get a letter grade in Los Angeles. We can make a decision whether to eat there based on their track record, but we can't do the same with doctors. Likewise, when a doctor has negligently killed or harmed patients, it's very beneficial to be able to see how many complaints they've received for lawsuit purposes. The fact that anonymous complaints can't be tracked proves how this isn't helpful in the overall patient safety aspect of why this project is important. While it's helpful that we as singular complaints can track you and While it's helpful that we as singular complainants can track you and make sure you're doing your job, it's also vital that this information be available to anyone who wants to see it, save any privacy issues. I have a genealogy database for my family that anyone can access, but only certain people can see the specific information for living individuals. This isn't rocket science. If one person can create genealogy software that does this, there's no reason a governmental agency can't. This is a lot of effort so that singular people can see this important data when it could be used for patient safety in general for thousands of consumers. I don't have a lot of confidence in the IT portion of these projects since Breeze is an enormous failure, as was documented in the state auditor's report. And the app that the board loves to brag about still doesn't work properly. We still get alerts all the time, but only when the app is actually active in our phones. And 95% of the time, we can't even tell why we're being alerted. It appears any little change to a doctor's profile triggers an app alert. including typographical errors. If you have the app closed for any length of time and then open it, a flood of alerts will come streaming through. It's just ridiculous. It's easier to just access Breeze via the website, even on the iPhone. I think too, you need to completely redo the complaint form itself and the format in which one fills it in online. You have to cater to the lowest common denominator, or a harmed patient is just going to give up before finishing it. You open that thing up and look at it, and even to me, it's daunting. So many words in tiny little font. It should ask a question, you fill it in and hit enter, next screen. If a question isn't relative, you shouldn't have to see all the associated questions that aren't relative. It should take you to the next relevant screen. Note that 4,000 characters, which is what Sean just admitted you guys give us to explain our complaints to you, is less than 1,000 words you're giving consumers to tell their doctor horror stories. It takes approximately 3 minutes to read 1,000 words. That's the same tiny amount of time you give us at board meetings to tell you important information, and you want us to convey our entire medical horror stories to you in 1,000 words. So my question is, how will the public know that their complaints are being timely updated? What prevents the board from just stalling updating these things if they want to withhold information from the consumer? We're seeing problems already on Breeze where the posting of documents aren't happening in a timely and required fashion. So if Breeze can have missing information due to tardy postings, what's going to prevent this system from having the same timely problems of information being posted? I mean, it sounds like certain things get triggered, but if you don't put in that thing in the first place, it's not going to trigger something later. And so it seems to me there will be an easy way to just, let's hold back putting that in yet so it doesn't trigger what the consumer sees. Are there going to be any safeguards that ensure that the information is being inputted in a timely fashion so that we can see it happening as close to real time as possible? And why aren't we working to make it so that consumers can see every single complaint filed against a doctor? That is crucial. It's important for us to be able to see our own complaints, but it's more important that everyone can see every complaint filed against the doctor so that they can make an educated decision on whether to go to that doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And Nicole, could you do me a favor and split those at the period marks with new line characters? We'll actually do it with in Excel with separate lines and separate numbers here when we're done. But Eric, if you could, you covered a lot of ground there, so I want to make sure that we have kind of accurately captured at least most of your points as related to this system. I'm not going to address some of the points here, but you would ask to show complaints for all complaints filed. So your point is you wanted to see complaints for all licensees filed.
Correct.
So like I said, so let's say show complaints for all licensees filed, not just the client. Yeah, don't worry, Nicole. We'll split it into separate lines. But update the complaint submission form online to exclude removing irrelevant questions. Yeah, we do have some requests up to update that form, but we'll keep that on here for now. I think that's more outside of the scope of the complaint tracking system, but we can keep it on here for now.
Well, except that people are not filing complaints because of the complexity of the complaint form.
No, and I understand, and those we do have some actually long-running requests to update some of the complaint form stuff in Breeze. It's just not within the scope here of this system. So, you know, if the tracking of this is,
but it should be, is the point.
Okay. The update the character limit on the complaint summary submission. Go ahead and keep that with that current one there about the relevant questions, Nicole. Just to point out, it is possible to upload a Word document at the end. But
again, you're asking
databases
who might be computer illiterate to do stuff, and if they can just type it in, they should have an unlimited amount of, you know, it's a computer. It'll take, I can type a book in. It shouldn't be difficult.
Certain databases have certain field limitations, and that's what we work in within
Yeah,
Breeze there.
but you have to create the limit. You can up the limits. That it's a very simple thing. I do computer programming. It's very easy to up the limits on these things.
Unfortunately, Breeze is an off-the-shelf system, and we don't have control over every little aspect.
Yeah,
of
that's
that.
not really
But
true because
there is a
other
workaround to
because
upload a
other
Word document where possible.
I know, but people don't know how to do that.
Okay. Let's see. Notify the public if their complaint has stalled and ensure the information being updated in a timely fashion. So we could show a last update date, but could you expand a little more about notify the public if their complaint has stalled? What is the definition of has stalled?
Well, so let's say we've heard complaints even from board member Judge Feinstein, who said that there was a DAG who screwed up a case so badly that information was not coming in a timely fashion. What if somebody is working on a case in the medical board office and they've screwed something up and they just don't want to show that they've wasted too much time on it? How do we know that it's being entered in a timely fashion so that we know that things are being worked on in a real time, as opposed to somebody holding something back and not entering it just so it doesn't show up?
Okay, so I don't want to seem argumentative here, but wouldn't the system not reflecting any update for a period of time show that something wasn't being updated? I'm trying to find a way to not prove
it
a
would show
negative.
that, but what if things were actually happening and they're not actively entering it? How do we know that the stuff is being entered accurately and in a timely fashion? Yes, it's going to show that nothing's happening, but what if something was happening and they're just not putting it in?
Yeah, for reporting purposes, some of these milestones are the same milestones that we use for our annual reports and things like that. So it's of great importance to us to have all the information in there as timely as possible. Now we do know there's delays and things happen. People take notes on paper and they don't go back and update the system for a day, that kind of a thing. It shouldn't be significantly.
Are there any protocols, say like time limits for like a doctor to submit a document, and there should be a cutoff date for that? If that date comes and goes and that's not in, is it going to show that on the website?
I would have to look into if there are legal requirements for responses at certain times and things like that. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Sean, I think to this point, and hi Eric, I'm Nicole. I think what we had discussed is possibly having some definitions along with the codes so that you know what they mean, and then maybe we could discuss, because the public maybe doesn't know every single thing we do, so those definitions could help explain better. I also think, as Sean mentioned, we could give an update date on those codes, as well as in the definition after we run it through legal and everything, maybe explain if there are any related, deadlines in which things have to be submitted, which I think would help you also to say, hey, to contact your analyst and maybe say, hey, I see that this has or hasn't happened. Has there been any follow-up on that? So is that kind of more to your point, Eric? Am I capturing that better?
Well, yeah, sort of. Yes and no, but it's like we're hearing from a lot of complainants who say, when they try to call their analysts for updates, they're not getting their calls back. So this goes back to my point in that we feel that we are unable to track what should be happening because we can't see it. And so if this new system isn't also going to show that, if it isn't going to show, like, say, well, the doctor is supposed to reply by April 1st. April 1st comes, it's now June 1st. Is there going to be an explanation as to why that deadline passed and nothing's been done? I mean, that's where people are complaining, is that they can't figure out why their complaints are taking so long. And when they call into the analyst, they're not returning the phone calls. So it just becomes a very frustrating process, which I think is what this program is supposed to alleviate. We're supposed to be able to look at it and say, oh, I see this date is here. The doctor's supposed to reply by such and such a date. Oh, he hasn't? Well, then what are you doing about getting that information from the doctor?
Yeah.
Nicole, can we include a line like number 14 down there? Let's say, when possible, provide any legally required response times for start and end activities, something like that.
Well, I think it's even more than just legally required. I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff here that isn't legally required. This goes back to patient safety now. This is what we need in order for patient safety to be #1 priority. Yes, legally required is your bare minimum, but you can do more than what's legally required. And you
Well,
often do.
if someone had a particularly required response time, that would be set forth in legal code.
Yes.
Is what I'm referring to. Yeah. So So if it says, for instance, some record's supposed to be replied to within 30 days, and it says that in the legal code, then that's something we could include in that activity description, Nicole.
Sure. And I think kind of to that point that Eric is discussing is we can't, this is, unfortunately, we get a lot of complaints a year. So what we're trying to do is give you at the best as we can, maybe give you 90%. And like you said, then they call their analyst. And then, there's other ways of elevating. I would hope that if you couldn't get a hold of your analyst, that you could then get in touch with someone else. But what we're hoping is that with the basic overall, we're giving you 90%. And then if there's a follow-up date, as Sean said, that's either required or in procedure or something like that, that maybe that could be displayed to you. And then you could either call in or follow up or however it works. But I wouldn't be able to say something as specific as, your specific complaint somebody was supposed to update on April 1st. We would give you the start date of the code, meaning that's when we sent out the request for the information, let's say in your example. And that would say, then any of our definitions would say it's 30 days when they're supposed to follow up. And so I think then that's where you'd have that information and be empowered with that information to be able to say, on my specific complaint, here's how I would kind of approach that, if that makes sense. And then you can
Got it. Yeah, it does.
Okay. So I think maybe we captured that more down here in this one. So we'll say legally required or internally required or something like that. Legally or required response times. Okay, so does that it sounds like I've got it a little bit better for you there, Eric?
Yeah, I think that looks good.
Okay, great.
Can we take the show complaints for all licensees filed and move that down to the include historical complaints? I think that's related more with that than.
Okay,
and I don't think that's an out of line request, since other DCA boards do that already.
Which one?
The show all complaints.
And then Sean, do you want me to separate out the update character limit on the complaint submission to a separate one as well?
I think those are related enough to keep them together.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
We won't, if we have to split something here, to address things separately, we will. We won't change the wording significantly on any of these questions. Eric, have we captured?
You have. Thanks, guys.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So we'll shuffle that around a little bit. All right. Thank you for your public comment here. Up here.
Sean, I just had a few follow-ups on Eric's comments. So I think, one of the things I think Eric was talking about and I share with him is spoon feeding, this process and information to the users so that it's easy. And I can imagine that it is a lot of data and for information, their stories that they're telling what has happened to them. And so thinking about can we have a saving kind of feature where, as they enter each question, that it's saved, once they've pressed submit for that particular question or data field. And then maybe overall it shows that as they're putting in their complaint, your complaint is 50% complete, as they're going through the process, because that is a lot of information and we wouldn't want it to just be lost, as it's being entered. So just thinking about how we can.
Yeah, this is one of my concern. We're getting off the track of the complaint tracking system, talking more about the submission of complaints through Breeze, which, there are issues with. We have some tickets up about that and stuff. To kind of redesign how that gets done and ask, like Eric pointed out, there's some relevant questions that get asked in that major screen of stuff, and so we're working on splitting some of that stuff up, making it a little more, like you mentioned, like my TurboTax example, one question at a time, and kind of ask the smallest unit of measurement. What we do see a lot of times is on the screen where you do have the description of your complaint, and it's limited to 4,000 characters because that's the database backend limitation. But even with the 4,000 characters, people will take more than 20 minutes to type that information out, and they go to hit next, and then the whole Breeze system crashes because standard web applications will only remember a user's transactional processes for 20 minutes at a time. You have to generate traffic within 20 minutes to keep it knowing that you're still out there and you're still alive. And so that's another reason we want to break down some of those screens that have tons and tons of questions on them, because it can sometimes take longer than 20 minutes there. But for the complaint description one, we specifically ask people, and I know there is, all different levels of technical, expertise with computers and stuff. But we asked, it's a notepad or any editor, basically, if you can type out that description, when we have people who's, slow typists or whatnot, or have a long story to tell, we ask them, type it all out ahead of time, paste as much as you can into there. If you can't get it all, just, attach it as an attachment when you're submitting your complaint to get over some of those, long delays. But we've all seen it with all kinds of computer systems out there. If you leave it open for too long and you go and you click on something and it'll say you've been logged out and you have to log back in or start over whatever process you're doing, it's, unfortunately a limitation of most online web applications and stuff. But your idea of making more of a more feedback available through the online complaint submission forms in Breeze, this is why we're choosing to do this complaint tracking system as, a in-house built system, is so we can build in some of the features and bells and whistles that may not be available through a off-the-shelf type of a system. With Breeze, we can ask, can you split this question off to this page, or can you split this question off to this page? But in terms of anything that would give any sort of percentage of the process that you're through the complaint, I just don't know. I mean, we could ask for what it would cost to get that kind of an enhancement made to an off-the-shelf system, but it would be very complex because we have to worry about breaking their core functionality that they have for their other clients through that off-the-shelf system.
No, that's fine. That's more of a nice to have.
Yeah, I agree too. Like we have something very similar to that on our survey that we built in-house, where it kind of lets them know how it's a long survey, and so we let them know how far the way they are through the process. But again, those kinds of things are more related to the complaint submission process, which we're definitely open to having talks, and you can even share the information about what we're trying to do in there with you guys who are interested in a venue separate than the complaint tracking system meeting, if that's okay.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I think I was thinking that they may be related.
Yeah, it's also interrelated, and it
Okay.
it is
Like it should
easy
be.
to blur the lines. Yeah.
The other question I had was, Eric brought up about making complaints visible, and I wonder, I would imagine this is kind of more on the legal side is, could complainants, maybe they check a box or they give consent to making their complaint searchable or public of some sort. So I think it's an interesting concept. I'm not sure how it can be done and if it can be done.
I would defer that question over to Carrie or anything like that if that's a conversation we want to have at another time or anything.
That can't be done under existing law for medical board complaints.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. Well, I hope, or it doesn't matter. I can't tell, but I'm gonna give me just a second here. Let me get Marianne Hollingsworth queued up, and then we'll get to Christina Hildebrand after that. I'm not sure which of you guys came in first here, so Marianne, you should be receiving that prompt on your end.
Hello?
Yeah, Marianne, we got
Okay.
you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, this is Marion Hollingsworth, a patient safety advocate. I'm looking at what this does, and this complaint tracking system, and it still doesn't solve the problem of the long duration of most complaints. I mean, by your own uh, statistics, a complaint takes 3.5 years from start to finish, and that's if it goes through the investigation process. Uh, and the complainant still doesn't have the ability to know what the doctor said, so they can counter that complaint, but the doctor can know what the complainant said, so he or she can come, he or she could counter that. So those are the still problems that people have with the complaint system, that these are taking so long and we're still put out in the cold. So would this involved system, could it still be quickly or easily solved and not have to go through this process if the investigator would give timely updates? And also regarding the whole system, I'm throwing a bunch of questions out here. How do we know that the updates are accurate? How do we verify if they are? And the reason I asked is that my investigator told me that my complaint had gone to the Attorney General's office and I should expect an accusation in the next few months. And I kept updating I kept asking every month, and I was always still there. And then suddenly I get a notice that they had a private negotiation and it was a PLR and it never had gone to the AG's office. So how do we know that this information is going to be is going to be accurate if the investigators themselves are not giving us are not giving us accurate information to begin with? That's
What would you suggest in that situation there, Marion?
there should be somebody, some supervisor to verify that this is what's going on. I mean, and unfortunately, the investigator in my place is now an investigator in one of your district offices. And there should be some type of verification of what's going on. And that could even be in-house, so that when someone does say, oh, we're going to be sending it to the AG's office, that you know that is true and not just something to appease me for, or appease the complainant for a few months, because that just, it just further erodes the confidence in the medical board if we're lied to. And I know a number of people who have been lied to and not told and given updates in a timely manner. Again, so why can't the investigators give like a monthly update for, you know, a quick email, a quick phone call, or both, just to say, this is where we are right now? And have a supervisor then verify that that did indeed happen. And also a reminder from the doctor who called up, who said that doctors are customers. It brings up the issue of the customers are always right, and the doctors are not the customers, because the medical board is in place to protect the public, not to treat doctors as customers. So I just want to make sure that everyone who's here today knows that is the issue, and not give doctors the benefit of the doubt as customers. So can anyone answer regarding the verification of the information?
I do know that sorry, Sean, did you want to go? Or?
No, go ahead.
So there is, hi Marion, I'm Nicole. I do know internally that we do have individuals who review the data, just the physical data in each unit, to ensure its accuracy. What I will say is that we cannot speak to the investigators giving, and maybe that's a better question for Carrie, but giving and calling you regarding the updates. The idea kind of is that we would, and I had kind of a thought while you were talking, so maybe you can see if you think what I'm saying is reasonable. I like the idea, or at least hear the value of the idea that we would give you an update when something has been updated. So you're not just continuously going into the system every day and hoping that maybe something's updated. So maybe what we could do is, if a code is, and this again would be a Sean question, but have maybe, and maybe not in the first round of things, that again is a Sean question, but as a code is updated, if you have an email on file, it's possible that we could set something up. Again, it would take a lot of, looking into to see the level of effort on this, but set something up that would send an email to you saying basically something about your complaint has been updated, and hopefully we could get more specific, something on your complaint has been updated. Is that kind of capturing what you're saying?
No, because it actually makes it more confusing, because so the online complaint system would be for the complainants to log in whenever they wanted to check on it. But you're saying no, they can't. It would only have to be triggered if an investigator gave an update.
No, sorry, you could absolutely, sorry, if I was unclear about that, you could log in anytime you want. I was just thinking, a lot of times there aren't going to be daily updates for you. So to kind of give you two options, you can log in whenever you feel like it, but also to give you some sort of email notification saying there was an update, and then you could go into the system and review the update. Basically, does that make more sense? Sorry.
That would be helpful too, just like a heads up, because, people have busy lives and they don't always.
Right. That's kind of more what I was thinking. That's what I would want. I would want to know if you had updated something. Okay.
Yeah, and also to know that that was verified by somebody, just so they wouldn't be trying to, appease us by saying, oh, it's here, and it's not. Because I said that just hurts the entire reputation of the board and the investigation process. So,
I received the data.
it's
Is this in relation to item number 8 though, or is this separate from that?
I was making it separate only because I think they kind of might be two different things, but I can put them together if you'd want.
Well, yeah, what we need to do is get each of these to something specific that we can respond to, and so.
Okay.
and identify what timely is, because if we're waiting, monthly seems reasonable to investigators. They would probably think only when something happens, and it's a progress report. It's like we're still waiting on the AG's office, we're still waiting on the doctor to give records, that would give an explanation as to why it's taking so long.
And I think
So we can strike that first part of timely and accurate investigation updates, just monthly updates. Is what your definition of timely would be, Marion?
That, I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
I don't want one every day, but just monthly would not be would not be unusual. But I think it would be more updating from the standpoint of what's going on.
Let's split those into two things there, Nicole. So the monthly update sent to the complainant, and then the second one being the email notifications when information in the system is updated to alert them.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
That way we're not waiting and waiting and waiting with no updates.
Sure.
Even something of, it's the same as last month would, be helpful, just so you know.
So okay. So in thinking about that, let's say this email comes in, with some sort of, because it may not change in a month, right? Some investigations do take quite a while. They are a little more intricate sometimes. So if there were no update, a monthly update that kind of gives you a snapshot of what's already been done, or would you rather it just say, here, go log into your complaint? Or are you looking for something kind of more like Miss Lubiano was explaining about some sort of visual or some sort of extra information?
I would want to know if nothing has happened, or if there had been an update, like, the medical board investigator met with the doctor,
Okay.
on this date,
Okay.
type of thing. Just to know that it helps give the impression that things are still happening in the investigation, and not, well, we're still waiting on the doctor and he hasn't done anything. So it's, it kind of shows that, or at least gives the impression that the medical board is still in charge of the investigation and not the doctor.
current complaint. What's the word I'm thinking of? Current complaint status.
Status, yeah. You don't need to give, you don't need to rehash everything that's happened up to that point.
Okay.
But just say, okay, as of, this is the newest thing as of right now, or the AG's office is still looking at it. Or if there's going to be a hearing, that's something that complainants would want to know, something that they could at least sit in on, even if they can't comment.
Sure.
And we're so often left out of the whole process. It's nice to know when there is something.
Back for number 7, can we, so give the complaint more information about the licensee's responses. Which type of responses are you asking about?
Well, this goes back to the whole investigation process. When you say this happened and this doctor never got informed consent for antipsychotic drugs or this surgery or whatever, and the doctor says, oh, yes, I did. I talked to her. But that doesn't mean that they talked to her about that. So it gives the, this is what our problem with the whole investigative process is that the complainant doesn't get the opportunity to counter what the doctor says. We don't even get the opportunity to know what the doctor says. Yet the doctor can know everything about what we've said that happened. So I don't even know if this format is a way of
Yeah, that's my
yeah.
problem is I don't know how I can make a
Right, so
requirement in an electronic system to change that process for you, so I'm looking for something I can, eventually we'd have to turn all these things into requirements of the system. The system must be able to do this.
Unless
And
you just say
so,
the licensee gave a response to,
That would be
Complaint.
one of the milestones that we've.
because that doesn't say what they said, but just that there was a counter.
Okay, so
And that would be like an update. That would be part of probably the interview process if they do have one.
yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So you're asking for start and end information on respondent interviews.
Okay.
Like, that would be my requirement. That's what I would turn this into, is that the complainant wants to be able to see when a respondent interview is scheduled and completed.
Right. Because I know there was one case where the doctor was able to put off the interview for 2 years, and that didn't end well for the complainant side. So, just updates like that. He gave his written response to it, or had the interview with the investigators, or, investigators went to the complainants, went to the licensee's office, just to know what's going on.
Okay. Yeah, no, I just want to have very clear-cut things that we can,
Right.
review legally and see if we can do them or not. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we
but
can reach back out to individuals, if we have clarifying questions after this, I guess, too. But I'm just trying to get it as succinct as we can.
And so knowing when the interview was doesn't give the complainant answers as to what the doctor said, but at least that it happened, so it is moving forward and not just waiting another year or 2 years for the doctor to get around to an interview.
Right.
Sure. Okay. So we have these ones for you, Marianne. Did we capture everything that you think should be involved as much as possible?
I'd like to change number 10, Nicole, to not a change to Breeze data, but a change to, data in the complaint tracking system. You wouldn't want to trigger it every time there's a Breeze update, just something relevant to what's going to show in the system.
Right. That sounds reasonable.
Okay. Okay, great.
Also, one quick question. When did the notice go out for written questions? Because I'm, texting with other people and they say they didn't see it. And I was wondering how that went out.
It's on the agenda. The agenda went out 10 calendar days before today's meeting. And then there's a second one to be scheduled for May 12th, 2023. It's a Friday. It'll be again from 10 to noon. We haven't posted on there because we didn't want to create any confusion with today's meeting yet. So that meeting will go up this week onto the website, and you'll be able to submit written before then too, and we'll incorporate it all into this and have it all viewable before that meeting as well
Thank
too.
you.
And then
Dr.
once-
Bholat has a question, Sean.
yeah, and then once we compile all those, then we'll be able to respond to them after both meetings. Sorry, Dr. Bullock, go ahead.
No, no worries. I just want to say on item 8, I think if the public can be very succinct and we can hear exactly what those milestones are, because no one knows that better than our public. What are those milestones? And then kind of an expected turnaround time. I think
Well,
those are very succinct.
milestones could be months and months, even years in between, but just an update as into nothing new, still waiting on this, just to let you know that they haven't put it, in a box in the file room forever, and as well as the milestones like doctor interview, AG's office, things like that, just like what's going on.
Exactly. And that was my point, is that exactly what you just said. What are those milestones? If they're clearly defined, at least the top priorities, I think that will be helpful. But thank you very much.
Good.
As you saw, we do have some that Sean already pointed out that we've had some discussions about. So if they're, and the public, I believe, has access to those slides still. So if there were any that they felt were not included, then that might be something to bring up during your comment at this point as well. Thanks.
Or again, and written comment too after
Sure.
the fact too. I don't want to make it sound like it's now or never kind of thing. So
No.
come here, Andrew. Did we capture that accurately for now, at least?
I think so. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay, next up here, let me see, Christina Hildebrand. Christina, you should be receiving that prompt on your end.
And I apologize if I spell your name incorrectly. I can't see the list right now, so. Sean will correct me, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll get it all updated. We can hear you, Christina. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you. And I'm not going to reiterate them, but both Eric and Marianne had comments that I had. The one place that I just wanted to further expand on something that Eric had mentioned in the sort of anonymous piece. It doesn't really, it's kind of related to that, but it would be helpful to know if the person who filed the complaint, even if they are anonymous, if the person who filed the complaint was the patient or a family member of the patient or a third party. That would be something of interest to us.
You're talking about in some sort of a aggregate complaint information about a licensee, not an individual. I mean, obviously the individual knows who they are that submitted the complaint, right?
Yes. So if you want to go look at a physician, right, and you look at their list of complaints, either they're closed or they're filed or they're, whatever the status is against them, that somewhere in there it states who filed the complaint. And just
okay, so yeah, and sorry, Christina, this is more for our note keeping thing than anything else. So could you go back up to Eric's comments there, Nicole, and I just want to see how we captured that. The show complaints for all licensee file include historically complaints against doctors that are closed, provide information on those complaints. Okay, so you could say related to item 5 then.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to overlay his. I wanted his to stand separate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're going to be separate. This is an addition onto that one. Yeah.
Sure. If complaint information, I guess. Be public.
Include who filed the complaint, example, complaint type.
It's not necessarily who, like I don't need a name. I just want more of a, was it the actual patient or their family member versus someone else, like a hospital or a doctor, another doctor or nurse, or, I don't know how detailed you can get in that, but at the very basic, either it was the patient or family member, or it was some other entity.
And so sorry, just to be clear, because you originally you mentioned anonymous complaints, so I just want to be sure.
I just want to in that anonymous complaints are included in that. So if it is anonymous, that it still shows up whether it was the patient, whether it was a patient of that doctor or whether it was some other entity.
Okay, so just to be clear on the inside, like from the back end of the system, if someone submits an anonymous complaint, that means truly anonymous. That means we even don't get the information about the anonymous complainant. So it's, if I may ask to remain anonymous, that is different. If I submit an anonymous complaint, we don't get that information. So we wouldn't be able to provide that to you, just to be clear.
Got it. So you don't have any, and maybe that's my next request. You don't have any, even on an anonymous person, you don't have a like a checkbox that says, are you the patient or family member? Like you don't have
if they want to be anonymous, they basically skip over all that stuff.
They're told that's it. You know, you're anonymous. You don't get to provide us. You get to provide us your complaint, but your information, we actually don't receive that information. So that's another thing that we've looked at is currently, if we do get an anonymous complaint, we don't even get that information at all. So unfortunately, that does make it hard for us to investigate anonymous complaints.
So maybe that's something, probably not for this, but something that maybe one.
But that's
on another, please.
Exactly. It is, but that is one of those things that we did. I do think that your question is still relevant to non-anonymous complainants as we
yes. No, it definitely is for that. I would like to see it for anonymous complaints too, if it were at all possible. I assumed that they got to choose whether they input that information, but just remain anonymous, but could say, you know, yes, I'm a family member. I just want to be anonymous.
Sure, and that can happen, and that's usually, so let's say someone does submit it online, and I know this is a little in the weeds, but I think this is helpful for you to understand as well, is that if they do submit an anonymous complaint online, as I mentioned earlier, if they do come back and say, hey, I didn't get any information on my complaint, or I don't know what's going on with my complaint, and they do tell us they submitted it as anonymous, if they can prove that they are the complainant in some way, shape, or form, like I said, we can then attach them to it. So that makes it a little, if they do eventually provide that information, we can attach it.
Understood. And then I guess my other comment is more of a question than a comment. And I may have a question after you give me the answer. So we have this. We then also have the patient liaison unit, which has been suggested in the Sunset Review. And then we also have this elephant in the room that all the consumer advocacy groups, including ourselves, want, which is for the consumer to have more of a voice during the process. So this very much seems more like the software that I can go and check my information and see where it is along in the process. My understanding is the patient liaison unit is more, or the complainant liaison unit, whatever it's called, is basically a person that can kind of help them through this process, I guess. But all those two are very much, again, the medical board giving information, pushing out information, versus the consumer having a voice. And I know this isn't the right place to say that, this isn't the right, I know this is what you're looking for, but I guess I'm still, similar to Marianne, saddened that we haven't gotten to the place where the consumer can have more of a voice along this process. And I would love to see this software be able to have, as Marianne mentioned, but be able to have a place where the consumer can also upload information into the system, or more information into the system as the complaint progresses.
Yeah, and that is something that would, as Sean kind of discussed, might be a second down the road, like submitting additional information to your complaint or things like that. But currently, and a lot of people may not know, if we do have an email address that if you needed to submit additional information for your complaint, because we know Breeze has limitations to the sizes of your, the things you would like to upload and what you'd like to do. So we do have that separate email address for that. Obviously, that doesn't make it perfect because it doesn't upload and attach to your complaint. And that is something that we would like to look into as further later types of things. So if that's kind of, again, Sean and I have to kind of quantify
I think it's not so much that it's not the initial, I mean, there are issues with uploading the initial complaint that have been talked about. To me, it's more, and I think to many of the advocate groups, it's the actual complaint process. So the fact that, as Marianne mentioned, that when the doctor gives their rebuttal, there's no way that the patient can give a rebuttal to the rebuttal, right? I mean, in any other court case, it's a 1, 2, 3. It's you submit, person replies, you submit your reply to the reply. That's just how court cases work. And so this is so far removed from anything that's sort of the legal system. And that's the piece that, you know, I would like to see the doctor's information, any, you know, and I get that it has to be confidential, but as the I'm going to call the plaintiff in the, or, you know, as the client of the medical board, I do feel like, you know, okay, this isn't stuff that we, you know, as general public can see, but the complainant should be able to see all of the documents that get filed along the way, and should be able to respond to those if they so want to. But I guess though, for this purpose, I feel like, you know, can we have a private portal, which if you are the complainant, that
this portal is only going to be for the complainant. So yeah, that's one thing I want to point out there. So Christina, you're asking through the complaint, you would like the complainant through the portal to be able to see any documents produced by the respondent. Is that
basically any documents produced relating to their case?
I think that is more relative to the legal aspect, though. So
it is. No, but we're documenting all requests here. We're going to respond to them if there's a legal issue. I want to document the requirement. If there's a legal issue, we'll respond to it. If there's a technical issue, we'll respond to it. If there's neither, then we'll look to include it in the system.
You got that piece of it, but really.
All right, but let me get that written down before I escape my mind. Sorry. Nicole, if you could do so, the complaint separate from this one, your upload. That's a good requirement. So the complainant should be able to view all documents. You said all documents produced in the course of an investigation?
Yeah.
Whether it's from the respondent, anybody.
I don't know legally what the word produce means, but yes, all documents that are.
I don't either. So I would just all documents related
that are related to.
Say all documents related to the investigation.
Yeah. Thank you.
From any source. And they say, put like, you know, respondent after any source. So when you're talking about, besides just the complainant, we're looking at respondents, anything that comes up in the course of the investigation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
So number 5, I changed that to say include the patient type, file the complaint example. Well,
Christina, while he's reviewing, could you just review the 3 of those for me to make sure we've captured it correctly?
Yep.
Can we change number 12, Nicole? Can you just say the complainant should be able to upload files relative to the complaint?
Yeah. Thank you. I was going to say that. And then the other one is fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, those all sound specific enough. Okay, let me go back to the list. Thank you, Christina. I'll go ahead and put you back on mute. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to lower everybody's hands and clear everything here and make sure that Michelle wants to run us. Okay, Michelle, give me just a second to find you here, Michelle. Hold on. Too many things open today. Okay, Michelle, you should be receiving that prompt there on your end. Actually, I think, yeah, sorry, we already did. No, Michelle, are you there? Sorry.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Montserrat Ramos, and I'm with Consumer Watchdog. One comment about filing complaints. People are not filing complaints because they don't know what information the board wants. That will trigger your reviewers to move their complaint forward and not close it. That's the goal, to write your complaint so your complaint will not be closed. Back to your complaint tracking system. Will there be a statute of limitations tracker on the notification system, with a separate statute of limitations tracker for minor children, meaning the traditional statute of limitations does not apply to a complaint filed on behalf of a minor child? You mentioned that the complainant can upload files, not to upload medical records or anything large. What about recordings and voicemails, etc.? Some codes we cannot share with a complainant for some reason. Can you share which information you cannot share with the complainant on the notification system? I have families who file complaints with the Department of Public Health, and the local health department is sending their complaints to this board. Our families are getting an email that their complaint has been sent to the board from the local health department. Is the tracking system going to access the complaint from the complainant? And will the complaint at some point be transferred back to the family or the complainant instead of the local health department? But still include a link that the local health department is involved and did file a complaint as well. Will the notification system include when a complaint has been filed by a hospital or medical institution? I have families that
Do you mind
call.
if I know you have a prepared statement here, but I want to
Oh
address
no,
these
actually,
before.
I have a running list of things
Yeah,
that we've been talking.
yeah. So I got the sense that we would let's address them one at a time if you don't mind. We're not gonna
Okay.
hold you to a hard time limit here or anything. So the statute of limitations tracker. So you're looking for the statute of limitations date set per complaint.
Right.
So if we just on in the complaint data, if we showed what the statute of limitations date was, if we display that per complaint, that's your ask on that one.
Well, that plus how long they help once the complainant has filed a complaint, as the process is going on and as they're getting notified, how much time they have.
Right. So
Like
that's set in stone, right? I mean, I don't know the law off the top of my head. Is like, right, it's 3 years from the date we received the complaint, or 7 years from some. But what I'm trying to make the point is when the complaint gets initiated, right, Nicole, we know that date. So we could set that date and say, display the statute. One of the requirements to display to the complainant the statute of limitation date.
Yes. So to be clear, though, the statute could change. And so that is something that could happen. But we do document the statute of limitations in a location in Breeze, which could be displayed. And to be clear, Michelle, hi, Michelle and Nicole. I'm not usually in these meetings. So we could display it, but there is no different location for the statute of limitations based on a minor child. What they would do is when the statute is told because it is a minor child, that is what they would put into that statute of limitations date. So it wouldn't tell you the statute has been told because it is a minor child. It would just say, here's what it is. Does that make it a little more clear?
Right. But a lot of families don't know that there's a separate statute for minor children.
Okay. So it sounds like that's more of a.
But the feature request would be to display the statute of limitation date.
Yes. And then we would have
people will know. People will know how long they have, because there's been, as it's been expressed by other advocates, there's been cases that have extended and they're getting closer statute, but the family doesn't know that. The complainant doesn't know that. So it'll give the family complainant opportunity to prompt somebody, either within the system or if it's in their investigator or wherever their complaint may be.
So would it be fair, I don't know if you can see my screen, we could include the statute of limitations and the different ways the statute could be told in that definition of the statute of limitations, as we kind of discussed, like each code will have the ability to give you a definition. So then you could click into it and say, here's what the statute of limitations means. Yes, it's 3 years usually from receipt of complaint, but it could be 7 years. It also could be told due to a minor. That type of information would be, we'd click you to a link where they could give you more information on that. As you're saying, the families may not know that. So I think that that's kind of part of that definitions role. Is that fair to kind of put in there?
That's fair, but I also think that because, and this was later on down my list, but it's appropriate for now, there's been cases from my families where their complaint has been sitting before a medical consultant for 1 year and 8 months. So, and I'm not sure how long it took to get to that medical consultant. So we're talking about running into that 3-year timeline. So, my families are contacting right now without the notification system. They're contacting their analysts, but they're not getting any responses for months and months upon a time. And that because they can't get a hold of their analyst doesn't mean that that clock is going to stop. That clock continues. So at least it gives the family an idea of how much time they have on their end before they have to take some type of action to try to save their complaint.
Okay, so I hear that. That makes sense to me. So maybe I could also reference number 8 that Marion brought up with the monthly updates being sent. In that monthly update, maybe we should include the statute of limitations date and the amount of time till we could do a quick calculation on that, the amount of time till it runs, if that's helpful.
Well, the statute of
That's
limitation date still is just the statute of limitation date. Yeah, the monthly update could reflect
That's
what's
what I'm
happened
saying.
since then, but yeah.
But the statute of limitations date could be one of those values that we include, so that, to her point, in case I don't know what it was, or in case I wasn't paying attention to that before, then my monthly update would come with that, and it would say, also, this is a statute of limitations, please be aware of that. Is that helpful?
I like 14, how you have 14. If we're going to add any more to that, let's do it as a separate one, then refer it back to that one above.
That's what I was going to do, is just kind of put it here and say, related to it.
If that's what Michelle wants, yeah.
Number 8, is that okay, Michelle? Is that capturing what you're asking?
That's okay. That's okay.
Because we have to have miles, things that we can complete, that kind of help us figure out what you're looking for, kind of. Item 8. Include limitations in monthly update. Okay, thank you. I know you have a list. So
but I'm not clear on that one now, because so number that's 16 or 17 or whatever that should be. If we're already displaying what the statute of limitations date is, what is expected in the monthly update?
Just that it would be included in that monthly update. She's giving us an additional information into that monthly update, right?
But if you're logging into the system to see the monthly update in the month, and the system already includes the statute of limitation date.
The original ask with the monthly update was that there would be an email, if possible, sent out that would give them a monthly update.
Okay, I don't see that then in number 8 right now.
Sent by, I'll say by email.
Sent by email. Okay, all right. Okay, got it.
Okay.
All right, sorry, Michelle. Number 15, recordings and voicemails being able to upload. So like right now we have the different upload platform called Box used for large file uploads, but you're asking to be able to upload directly through the system.
Where do people find that software?
In communication with the analyst. If the analyst, if you're talking with them and they say I have more files to upload, it's possible for the analyst to give you a link that is specific to you, and they upload. It's not it's
so that it's confidential.
Yeah.
What if my families can't get a hold of the analyst for months and months upon a time, but they have this information they need to provide the board? that would support their complaint.
So you're asking to be able to upload that through this system. Okay. Yeah, we can look at that. Email. So number 16, you said that was in response to another government agency, like a mandatory reporter type of government agency filing a complaint on someone else's behalf, and you want, because right now the complainant on that complaint that comes to us, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but the complaint on those types of complaints is the government organization who is the mandatory reporter. And while the patient's information might be listed on there, they're not the complainant. So you want the ability for a patient who's not the complainant to be able to access these complaints?
But recently, this has happened recently within the last few weeks, where my advocate family member is receiving the email from the board saying that they received a complaint from the local health department on behalf of them. And the board is asking my advocate family for information. So you would think at some point that with a notification system, you would think at some point it would need to transfer over to the family, but still have a link that the local health department filed a complaint as well. Because the board is reaching out to the family at this point.
Okay, that makes sense. I'd have to talk more closely with the program to see how they normally do that and what the source would be on that complaint. So thank you for bringing that up, but that's something we will flesh out. But let me get a little better email to notify the complainant.
Well, that's what's currently happening. Now, we can't change the complainant on the complaint because we need to track where those sources come from, Nicole, but they're asking for, even if they're not the complainant, to be able to have access to view the complaint in the system.
Yeah, so what I would have to check with the program, and again, this would be part of the fleshing out, is I don't know if they start a new complaint or if they just use the complainant. We have what's called additional parties, that if they're leaving the source as what it is, we could add an additional party that they're probably contacting, to Michelle's point, to include information related to that complaint. So I think what we would probably have to say is email to notify the complaint, sorry, let me think this through a little bit.
Well, the feature request would be allow involved party other than complainant to be able to access the information in the system.
Yeah, that is not the complaint, but I'm going to need some context. Otherwise, I'm going to remember. Allow involved party that is not the complainant to
access the complaint tracking system. And yeah, if that's, right now we're only planning on allowing the complainant, but we can look at, is there other involved party types that across the, the board
Sean,
would
I have
be
an additional
allowed?
comment related to this.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
So since the local health department triggered the board and sent the complaint to the board, and the board contacted my advocate family, now the advocate mom is preparing her own complaint, which she's going to send to the board. So does that mean it's two separate complaints? The local health department's complaint and then the mother's complaint?
Yes, they would be two separate complaints, and the mother would have access to the complaint that she submitted. But I hear that your ask is that she should also have access to following up on the other one, which I can see.
Right, and there should be a link within her complaint that the local health department complaint as well.
So that's a next.
We might have to just give her a separate login or something if you're finding that that's acceptable.
Well,
okay.
let's add another row, Nicole, and let's say allow access to related complaints.
Sorry, hang on, let me just finish this one so I don't forget.
Yeah.
It's providing additional information and wants to follow up status of the...
Because if we can't do one for some reason, maybe we can do the other or something. Let's get them.
Right.
Both put it down.
Okay, and so we'll say allow access to a I guess not allow access to a complaint, but yeah, allow access to complaint through a link in a submitted complaint to a government entity related. Is that allow access? Does that make sense to you, Sean?
So I'd say allow access to a related complaint.
Through a link submitted by a government entity, and I'll put refer to which one?
Yeah,
15 to 16. Okay.
sure. And then delete complaint after submitted there.
After submitted. And I can always move those around, I guess.
Yeah, we'll flush. That's enough to know what we're talking about here. So, and the recordings we did, involved party we did, monthly update. Okay, Michelle, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay.
If you're happy with all this so far.
Okay.
Do you have any comments?
Oops, the number was wrong. Okay.
Will the notification system include when a complaint has been filed by a hospital or medical institution?
What? Can you clarify that?
Like for instance, if there's been an 805 report filed by a hospital, not the specifics, but just that there's been a complaint filed by a hospital.
Well, so again, this system only tells the complainant about their complaint. So the hospital would be the complainant in that situation. Who are you expecting it to notify?
Well, it's kind of linked to some of the earlier conversations about, and I'll add my portion to it. I know some of the other advocates have mentioned the importance of knowing other complaints filed against their doctor. I would say specifically in a lot of my advocate families' cases, complaints that are filed during that same time frame, where a family member files a complaint and there are other open complaints against that same doctor during that same like 3-year time period or so.
I think what she's asking for is more related to item number 5, which is the public complaints, being able to see all complaints is what I'm hearing. Correct, Michelle?
Right. But even more specifically to open complaints, that when a family member or complaint files a complaint and there are open complaints to that doctor in the process now. I mean, I would absolutely love the historical complaints, but I'm looking specifically at open complaints.
So as part of your, let me ask this quick, Nicole. So as part of your complaint lookup, Michelle, you would want to see in the stats of your complaint how many other open complaints against that same respondent there are.
Yes.
Oh, I was hearing it differently. Okay.
That would also include.
I heard it both ways too, Nicole. So yeah, we can.
That would be open complaints, but that would also include a complaint filed by a hospital as well.
Okay, so let me put that one.
Any open complaint. You'd want to go. I've got a complaint open against Dr. Johnson or whoever. And when I go in there and I look at the complaint, the status of my complaint in the complaint tracking system, when I go in there, there would be a field for, in addition to my complaint, Dr. Johnson has 2 other open complaints.
Exactly.
Within the current complaint, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Michelle, let me go back because I need some clarification on the 805s because I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying if there is an 805 open related to an incident that possibly the family member was related to, that you would want to have the information to be able to access and see the status of that complaint. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. Or even at least to know that there was a complaint filed by a medical institution.
Okay. So I think that's separate too. So see 805 complaints filed. Is that kind of more?
Yes.
Against the licensee. Okay, so let me kind of flesh. So let me get this one better. I'm gonna have to change these a little bit. Related to item 5. Sorry, so I just want to make sure. So I'll take that out. Related to an incident that a complainant filed that is related to an 805 report. And only if it's open or if it's also closed?
I think both. If it's closed or it's unsubstantiated, what have you, I think it should be both.
Okay. Oops. Okay. So let me go ahead and read them over, and I'll also read them over to make sure they make sense since I was trying to rapid type. So there.
It's like 19 and 20 are both in the scope of the
different.
current complaint. When you're looking at the current complaint in the complaint tracking system, you want to see any other account of any other open complaints against that licensee,
Yes.
including those that are 805 reports.
So you want me to wrap
Yes.
them up?
No, you can leave them separate. I just want to be sure that.
Okay. And I can clean these for this.
And then 21 is, yeah, the 805 complaints in general. We're talking about if complaint data was somehow going to be shared with non-complainants through this system.
Sorry, Michelle, now that he's saying that, I realized, I think you said within the last 3 years.
Yes, because that's usually how long you keep the complaints in order to combine them with if you made close of complaints, combine them with current complaints. At least that's how it's been explained to me in the past.
Yes, that is my understanding as well, I should say. Voicemails being able to upload it to the system. Status of the government agency complaint. I'm wondering if that is the same thing. Is providing additional information, wants to follow up on the status of the government agency. Oh yeah, we did. I forgot. Sean wanted to separate that out in case we can only do one or the other. I got it. Okay. 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 I think I'm okay. Michelle, could you confirm for me that that's how you intended these to come out?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, great. And any more for you? I know we kind of stopped your list, so I want to make sure that we get them all.
Okay.
Oh, let me give you.
I have families that call in and cannot get a hold of their analysts. My families are told that they can only speak to their analyst and no one else, but that analyst has not returned calls or emails in many months. What about, because this has happened a number of times, what about when the analyst or the investigator has been changed in your place? Will that be included in the notification system?
I know. Well, so the current analyst assigned, current investigator assigned, current unit assigned as it makes its way through the different units. Yes, that will be shown in there. So you should, always see who it's currently assigned to and the history of it. It went from this person to this person, this unit to this unit, and made its way through the process.
It's not necessarily a change of units. I mean, they'll be assigned an analyst or an investigator, and they're trying to contact that person, and they can't. And at some point in time, long down the road, they find out there's actually someone else that's been assigned to their case, but they've never been notified. So I think this would be.
Yeah, I think the clarification that Sean is explaining is it will be assigned to the individual. And so when it changes, our system, if you do have an investigator that changes, it should be changed in the system. So would you be okay, and I put this here, so correct me if I got this incorrect, to have it, have that be one of the notifications to a complainant if there's a change to the responsible party?
Yes, with the contact information for
Okay.
whoever the new
If we can do
analyst
that, okay,
investigator is.
with contact information.
Well, so if you go back to the presentation that we gave, the one that's the slide titled Complaint Activity Units, it'll show in there that, you know, it's assignment and completion to the different units, the analysts and the managers and the investigators. So that'll be all updated there. What if the email was, hey, here's, you know, this complaint was reassigned to somebody, a notification went out, but just to, you know, what I hate to do is put static information in the email that we have dynamically living somewhere else. So if I tell you, hey, Sean's now, you know, reviewing this complaint and his phone number is, you know, blah, 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 916-263-2524. And then for some reason, you know, I'm just playing this scenario out. Some reason my phone number gets reassigned and now that's not my phone number anymore. The minute I send you an email with that I'm giving you static information that is my email, whereas the point of the system is to have dynamic information. And so that if my phone number gets updated in our records here internally and you log into the complaint tracking system, I'd still send you a notification letting you know, hey, this complaint was reassigned to Sean. But, you know, log into the complaint tracking system to get his contact information so you're sure you're getting the latest and greatest, you know, or you get that email and then, you know, later on that day, that, you know, or the 2 weeks later or however long later, that complaint gets reassigned to somebody else. You know, again, I feel more comfortable sending you a notification that the assignment changed, but that you get that most up-to-date contact information. And we can have in that email a link that takes you right into the complaint tracking system. You just have to log in to get the information. Would that be okay? Or is it you specifically want that contact information in the email so you don't have to log into the system?
It would be helpful to have the contact information in whichever way you can provide it, because I'm just letting you know that it's not happening now. So if this system could
None of this is happening now
make
because this is a brand new
happen,
system.
then yes, then whichever way you can make that happen, because it's been very confusing for families that can't get a hold of the board and think that they have an investigator or an analyst still working on their case when they don't, and they're not being notified. And it's, you know, it's really difficult to get a hold of anybody, and you're having people tell them that they can only speak to their analyst. They can only speak to this person and no one else, but they can't get a hold of them by any means necessary. So if this system will provide that information to them, it'll help everybody involved and will hopefully help move that complaint along.
So am I hearing
I
that
like the
there's
way
another-
Nicole's.
Oh,
Go ahead,
I was just, am I hearing that there's another ask of some sort of way to elevate your complaint as well? If you're not getting response, I mean, I'm not sure how we would quantify that if it's, you know, you've contacted 3 times but we could at least flesh out what could or couldn't be possible if I'm hearing that, Michelle.
How about this, Nicole? Why don't we put down an ask of the ability for the complainant to request their analyst to contact them, and it's logged, it's documented, it would get tracked in the system, and so then the complainant has a log of basically I've reached out and asked somebody to contact me, and if it's gone unanswered, they would then have some sort of a proof. You know, I mean, people leave voicemails and things get lost in the ether. You know, like this would allow them to log something saying that I want someone to reach out to me, and then if analyst doesn't log in there that they've reached out to them, then that's something quantifiable.
Okay.
Is that okay? Did that capture it also? Okay. I think I'd like to leave both separate if you're okay with that, just so that we could see both.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely 2 separate things. Yeah. Sure. I like how you documented the one about we'll send the contact info, but we'll say for the most current information and give them a link back to the complaint tracking system and stuff like that, so that if they
I think if it's a link, then it's more likely to be clicked instead of trying to remember where the login is and all that stuff.
Right. No, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I always plan for the worst, and you know, it's very infrequent that someone's contact information with the board does change, but you know, anything we can do to eliminate confusion, I think we do. So
sure, I think it happens. Thank you.
I think Dr. Bholat has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Bholat, I didn't see that.
Hey, no worries. On 23, I think we want, it's if the analyst was not responsive, right? I think it says responsive. And I just guess that redundancy, it goes back to the 3 points you made, definitions. And you talked about, I lost my 3rd point here. 2nd point is not only definitions, but turnaround times and defining milestones. So on those turnaround times, if I'm the consumer, I'm the public, I just want to know, hey, is it going to be week? And if somebody's out because people take vacations or they're ill, how does that get rolled over? And that's obviously for our executive team to concern themselves. But I think it's an important point so that people don't feel that they ask and don't have a response.
I think we had another ask similar to that somewhere with the definitions, and I can't remember which one.
We'll find it. We'll link it up.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Regarding definitions, I'll make myself.
When you write service level agreements in there too, for me, so that that'll trigger that. It's not just the turnaround response time on a medical request getting submitted, but the turnaround time on an analyst returning a call, that kind of a thing.
I'm sorry if I've spelled your name wrong, Michelle.
It's okay.
Well,
Trying. I have a tough last name too, so I get it. Okay, and did you have more for us, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay.
Some families have received a call from the board stating that they received a complaint from Department of Public Health, but they didn't name the physician. The families had multiple complaints before the board and requested which doctor is this complaint linked to, but the board can't tell them, so the complaint goes nowhere.
Could you give me a specific example so I can help figure out how we would be tracking that currently in the system and how I could help with that?
Well, wait, I don't think we can discuss the specific example.
Sorry, not an exact complaint, just kind of a, sorry, not an exact complaint, but just, I'm kind of not understanding. So you're saying that like public health sends us something and they don't know the doctor?
Well, the thing
But
is that I have families filing complaints with the local health department in order to support their complaints because we don't have any input in the enforcement process right now. So that's one way to verify and support the family's complaint. Now, there's some families that have multiple complaints, that there's been a team of doctors involved in the harm or the death complaint. And when they file the complaint to the local health department, just like in the other case I mentioned earlier, just forward it to the medical board. So the medical board contacts the family, but the family wants to know more specifics. Well, which doctor? Because they haven't filed just against one doctor, they filed against multiple doctors. But the board tells them they can't give them this information. And so that complaint doesn't go anywhere. So how can we remedy that when a family member has filed multiple complaints against multiple doctors?
I just can't think of a way the system.
I mean, the one that we talked about, the related complaints were.
Yeah. But I think I don't know how to help the complainant, and I'm trying to think through. They don't know who the doctor is, but they've submitted it on multiple doctors. I'm trying to think through how.
Yeah, they submitted multiple complaints to the medical board against multiple doctors. But the complaint system to, Department of Public Health, as far as we believe, was separate, right? And so we're trying to get that information, and then we want to submit it later on to you, the board, to support our complaints. But there's been cases where Department of Public Health isn't responding. They're just forwarding these complaints to you, the board,
Mhm.
You know, sometimes, luckily lately, they've been notifying the families, but in the past they were not. So
Mhm.
then the board contacts the family, but they don't know. You know, they filed against multiple doctors, not just, it's easy if it's
Right.
just one doctor, so you'll know. But if there was a team of doctors involved, they filed against multiple doctors. And when they ask, the the board says that they can't tell them. And so then that complaint from the health department goes nowhere because the family can't provide that information because they don't know which doctor, because they
Is
filed
is it
against multiple
is
doctors.
it the health department not forwarding the respondent information to us, or
No,
is it
Sean, I think that's what I'm saying. I don't know how the system can help, because what I think happens is, because we got it from another source, the
right?
complainant was not the source. We know who the doctor is, but we can't tell the complainant that legally, is what I think I'm hearing. So what Michelle is saying is, how are they supposed to provide more information to us on the correct complaint without knowing who the doctor is? And I just don't know that that's something our system can kind of
But
solve.
they do know who the doctor is, right?
Well,
I mean,
We
if
do.
they
they
haven't just
submitted
filed
the
against
original
one
complaint.
doctor, they filed against multiple doctors.
And maybe in one incident. So let's say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, maybe I've had a surgery at a hospital, but there's a surgeon, there's an anesthesiologist, there's a, maybe follow-up, or maybe care was transferred to my primary. So I think, right? Is that what I'm hearing, Michelle? There may be multiple doctors
There are
involved in
multiple
your
doctors
instance.
involved in the case of a death.
Yes. And so what they're saying is, I don't know what to provide you because I don't even know which doctor we're discussing. But what I'm thinking is, just, and maybe Dr. Bholat, I know you have your hand up. Do you have something to maybe add to this that would clarify for me? Sorry, I
We
think
can't
I'm
hear you.
Not to get into the weeds and discuss a particular case, what strikes me, Michelle, is Department of Public Health versus the Department of Healthcare Services. So perhaps that bifurcation, regardless, it may mean on behalf of this Department of Public Health is filing on behalf of the patient and his or her family, and that there's a separate piece that's happening that on behalf of seems to be the challenge, right? So I'm just making sure with all of the different bits and pieces of healthcare that happen in the state, if it's really the Department of Public Health or should it be with the Department of Healthcare Services? And seems like the most streamlined way is directly providing to the medical board on behalf of the patient and the family. Otherwise, it seems like you're getting two organizations trying to get the information, and I think that is a challenge. It
I
is
think
a
some of
challenge.
it can be from mandated reporting too, Dr. Bholat. So I think what the, CDPH is saying, we are mandated, or we know that although this complaint does relate to us, it also relates to the physician. So there may be some sort of investigation happening through the Department of Public Health where they identify a doctor who maybe they believe they should be forwarding to us to do an investigation. I think that's kind of what Michelle's saying. So she may have submitted a complaint to them, but also she may not have. So then they may reach out to the patient. And so, does that make more sense? So I think that's where the confusion comes in, is that there's this disconnect of the patient understanding, not necessarily an understanding, it could be just a straightforward, like they have no jurisdiction over it, but it could also be the other way around. So
like something that happens in a hospital,
Yes.
Department of Public Health. I got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you scroll up a little bit, Nicole, though, can you go to item number 16? I mean, we already covered it in 16, basically. Allow involved party that is not the complainant to access the complaint tracking system. So
yeah, I just don't
these
know if
people would be an involved party to the complaint, right?
I'd have to look, I would think, but again, I don't know. That would be a Carrie question, whether we could even do that.
We're not getting into the legal or the technical. We're just collecting asks here.
Okay.
The ask is covered by item 16, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, I just needed more information from Michelle to understand.
Yeah, I want to be sure I'm understanding it too. Michelle, does number 16 sound like it would cover your concern there? If these people are, the ones that submitted it to the Department of Public Health, and then they turn forward the complaint over to us, we know, I mean, we must have these people's information because we're reaching out to them for something.
Right.
So they would be an involved party on one of our complaints, even if the Department of Public Health is the actual complainant, if we can find a mechanism to allow those people to access the system too. See what we can do.
I just think this might be a two-parter, Sean. I think they might be able to access some, but not others. So that's why I want to make sure we include in the response different types of complaints received and whether they would have access so that Michelle gets her answer.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to look into all different involved party types, and that's
Yeah.
going to be.
Yeah. Thanks,
What's-
Michelle, for clarifying that. I know it gets in the weeds sometimes, so I just want to make sure I understand.
No, thank you.
Okay. And do we have more from you, Michelle?
What about the complaints? Because I know it's been a number of cases with our advocates. The complaints that are sitting, and I kind of mentioned this in an earlier comment, the complaints that are sitting before a medical consultant for a year and a half, a year and 8 months, and they're not moving. And when a family member reaches out to CCU analysts, they're just saying it's with a medical consultant, and that's it. How can the system be used to not only prompt a complainant, but possibly also prompt CCU or the medical consultant to see how we can move the complaint along, or possibly even triage the complaint to someone else who can review it?
Yeah, I think that would you could agree that that's included in number 23, where we're requesting the ability to send requests for contact. So for instance, if you feel that it's been a medical consultant for a while and nobody's told you why, because I know sometimes we have limited medical consultants and limited specialties, so it does take a little longer. But I will say that if it would at least give you the ability to say, okay, I've already asked my analyst, I've got nothing, that would elevate it. And then you would at least get a response, maybe from a manager or someone else who could give you additional information. Would that be captured there?
Possibly.
Okay. And I can put a note that says specifically.
Because again, under that complaint activity units, you'll see when it's assigned for medical consultant review, and then eventually when it's completed. So you would have that running ticker there showing you, and it would just be asking for updates if you felt like it was going too long.
Right. We do have some of those in there, Michelle, too, where when it's assigned to that that group or that unit, and then also when it gets assigned to or at least that's what we're suggesting at this point, when it then gets assigned to the medical consultant. So you would see a movement at least in where it is in the process, if that makes sense. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay. But I will put a note specifically related to medical consultant reviews. Oops. Or maybe not specifically related to, including. Let's say. Okay. Okay.
And I know this was mentioned before, but it's so important, I want to mention it again. Will the tracking system notify the complainant once the physician has been interviewed? And I know it's been brought up, but I'm saying it again, because this will give the complainant the opportunity to provide information that they've been accumulating since they filed their complaints. And that would also include like what we're doing with the local health departments. If there's statement of deficiencies found, that's information that some of these families have that they haven't been able to get to the board. So that would be a prompt for them to at least, a notification of trying to get this information, this confirmation information to the board.
Yeah, I think we have that captured in number 7. So we'll make sure to look into that.
What is the tracking system going to include once the complaint leaves the medical consultant and goes to the AG's office? Besides, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that'll be explored with I think number 8 and also in what we can and can't show and things like that. But I believe, we kind of are measuring it right now by what are you normally or what you should be getting updates from. And I know at this point, individuals should be getting letters related to I think.
Which they're not. Right.
And we're hoping that the system will help with that too.
And there's a complaint activity disposition slide that shows you the actions after it's gone to the AGs and stuff, so you can refer back to that there.
What kind of slide is it?
the slide entitled Complaint Activity Disposition,
Okay.
the one that we went over earlier today.
Okay.
Just in the interest of, you know, the meeting time and stuff like that. I have you refer to that. If you have questions, you can. And
okay. Well, some of the
some
things
additional questions.
that you know, we know the typical, you know, once it goes to AG's office and the DAG writes the accusation. But some of the things that we aren't notified of now and would be helpful is if a settlement conference has been scheduled, notification of the settlement before it's offered to a physician, notification when a complaint is scheduled to go before an ALJ and to a hearing, notification if the board does not approve of the ALJ's judgment, notification when the complaint, if they don't approve and the complaint goes before a panel hearing. Also, if a doctor surrenders his license or her license, or the license is revoked, will the notification system notify the complainant the doctor is reapplying for his or her license? If the doctor goes before a panel hearing to terminate his or her probation early, will the complaint be notified? If the doctor goes before a panel
Michelle,
hearing,
slow down a sec. Let's get these
Yeah, I think
documents. They're all
what
individual.
I'm hearing is she wants to know about the administrative process and then the reinstatement is what I'm hearing. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah, that's what I got to. So all the different closures that we had listed there on the complaint activity closure screen, you know, a lot of revocation was on there and stuff like that. But the additional ask I'm hearing is you want to know if they reapply later on down the road.
right. For those that surrender or license is revoked, will the complaint be notified when they reapply and when they go through that system? And also those doctors on probation and they apply for early termination, will the complaint be notified then?
sorry, hang on. And then the application for reinstatement is submitted. So there's the process and the application for reinstatement is submitted and eventual possible reinstatement. Okay.
Nicole, Michelle also mentioned early termination of probation.
Right.
Oh, yeah, very good. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Application for reinstatement or early termination of probation. Statement or completion of probation due to granted. I couldn't think of the word, sorry. Petition. How about that one? Okay, there we go. Now I got it. Okay.
Okay. Let's see, where was I at? I think that's it.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, we're 45 minutes over anyways, but
That's why I was like, I don't know.
we got to get all those probing questions in there. I don't see any other requests in queue at this time, so so I appreciate Ms. Lubiano and Dr. Bholat hanging out the extra time with us. We have another meeting to post right now. It's scheduled for May 12th, 2023, a Friday from 10 to 12. We'll be cleaning up this list, posting it as a material to that, because that'll be the written comments for that second meeting. We won't have responses back that we're ready to publish until we have the full list compiled and stuff like that. But we'll be posting these questions or these suggestions just so, you know, duplicate suggestions don't have to be made. But we'll be getting that agenda again posted this week. So anyone who has additional written comments, things that come to mind in between now and then, more than welcome to submit them via email. The instructions on how to do that will be on that agenda as well. But yeah, Dr. Bholat, Ms. Lubiano, unless you guys have anything else, I think Nicole and I have plenty of stuff to start digging through. Thank you
No,
again, Nicole.
nothing further.
Thank
from
you.
me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, again, appreciate everyone's time today. Look forward to the second meeting and see what we can get worked out. Everyone take care, and I'll go ahead and put up a slide about that second meeting here for a few minutes and then adjourn the meeting. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.